When people talk about the greatest new gen protagonists, people often talk about characters like Yuji or Eren, just to name a few. But one character that's hardly ever brought up in those conversations is Denji. And in my opinion, Denji is a super underrated character. He has some of the best character development I've ever seen. And let's not forget that there's plenty more to come. Chainsaw Man isn't even 100 chapters, which is half the length of some of these other series. I think part of the reason that he's so underrated has to do with the fact that not everyone understands him, or at least understands his morals. But people gotta stop hating on my boy Denji like that. So I made this video. Although quickly before I hop into the meat of the video, I want to say that this video will contain major spoilers. So if for some reason you haven't read Chainsaw Man yet, you've been warned. Anyway, let's talk about why I think Denji is a great protagonist. If we're talking about a character like Denji and trying to understand him, we have to start with where he came from. Denji was born without a mother and his father died at a young age, leaving him with enormous debts to pay off as a child. And because of those debts to the Yakuza, he was forced to do anything to pay them off. For all those years, he was forced into child slavery and things of that sort. So the only thing on his mind was money, which is why for the majority of the story, he's just chasing materialistic objects and never any real emotional connections, which led to him being easily manipulated. Denji went from someone who only values money to valuing human connections over everything. And I believe the thing that changed him the most were his friends like Aki and Power, who felt like siblings to him. Throughout the series, we get to see these three grow closer and closer and form real bonds. We also didn't see the brightest times with Denji. We got to see some of his sadder and rougher moments, which I really appreciated because that's not something you see every day, especially in modern shonen manga. We got to see times where he was lost in his own mind, and times where he didn't feel like thinking anymore for himself. A big part of Denji's character growth came from when Denji had to take care of Power, who at the time was mentally unstable and overwhelmed by anxiety because of the Darkness Devil. She was so scared that she wasn't able to go anywhere without Denji. He always had to be there to comfort her, even in the shower. If it was the old Denji, he would have only thought about Power's body, but instead he felt nothing of the sort. It was still love, but a different kind of love. He loved Power as a sister. Seeing Denji caring for her shows how human he is, and it makes him seem way more relatable and way more human. And remember, Denji wasn't capable of those kinds of emotions at the beginning of the series. I felt the same way when I read Berserk. At first, Guts seemed cold, but when I got to see him at his worst and got to see him caring for Casca, it really developed him as a character, and that's what made him the great character that we know him as today. The next point I want to bring up has to do with the whole thing about Denji being a dog. And I know a lot of people are just joking about it, and this isn't for you, but this is for the people that actually don't understand why he was acting like that, and why he didn't want to think for himself. So, as I mentioned before, he grew up with no one that liked him. No friends, no family. And after going through so much, he develops a bond with Aki and Power. He thinks of them as his own siblings. And so it's no surprise that when he loses Aki by his own hand, his mind just breaks and he doesn't want to think for himself anymore. It's because every time he's went out of his way to think and create relationships with someone, like Reese for example, it just ends tragically. And so the only comfort he finds is Makima, who was the first person to accept him and take him in, and she always seems to know what to do, so he just rather let her think instead of doing the thinking himself. And for me, this was the saddest part of the whole series. Not Power's death, not Aki's death, or anyone else's. Just seeing Denji like that, really not wanting to think for himself and just closing out as a human being, it really had me feeling some type of way. And this is where I find Fujimoto to be a real innovator. He's one of the only authors that goes that deep into a character psychologically. I mean, you see it sometimes in seinen, like Berserk for example. But in a shonen, especially something on Shonen Jump, you really don't see that type of writing with most protagonists. I think the part I find the most fascinating is that he barely grows physically. However, he grows enormously mentally, which is refreshing compared to other protagonists. Just because he's different doesn't mean he's worse. And in my books, I actually prefer characters that are different, something that we've never seen before. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about Denji in the comments. Hopefully I managed to change some opinions about him, or maybe even put my boy on your top protagonist list. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time.